Good morning. Wow, that's a spectacular crowd here. Thank you for that introduction, Daniel. It is surreal to share the stage with such accomplished thought leaders and practitioners. And I'm excited to talk to you about my experience as a product leader and how you can find the right target segment, the right customer segment for the products you want to build in order to grow your business. Adding a bit more of flavor to the introduction. I'm originally from India, and I've been in Norway for the last 9 years now, over 9 years, and I've been told that every Norwegian is born with a pair of skis. There's a similar thing about Indians too. Might I say they're stereotypes here. Most of us were born as developers. So I've spent about, give or take, 9 years as a developer on the other side, and then transition into an MBA into the product management world for over the last 10 years. And as a passionate product guy, I also run, like Daniel said, a Product Tank Oslo, which is a meetup of 4,000 plus members in there. Bulk of them are developers, designers, and product managers, product leaders, of course. So if you're interested in following what we do there and you want to join that, feel free to scan the QR code, and you will understand why my fascination with QR codes in a few seconds. So feel free to join that, and happy to talk to you guys about it. Right, let's set the context before diving into some details. That's a juicy picture, isn't it? I've been told lunch is on the other side, and I have to ramp up your appetite for lunch. But there's also another reason. You see, I've spent a couple of years as a product leader in a company called Favorite. Quick show of hands, how many of you know this QR code or know this brand Favorite? Yay, that's great. And ex-colleagues from Favorite, fantastic. So this is exciting. Favorite was a startup from 2019. And what we did was we essentially had a QR code solution for the hospitality industry. Good funding, venture-based startup, rapid growth ambitions. So we were heading to world domination. We had scaled the size of the organization. At a point in time, we were 100 plus. You couldn't call us a startup anymore, right? And we had even gone beyond the boundaries from Norway, hopped into Sweden and the UK. And several of our customers loved the product we were building. They were excited, they were bought into the vision we had, and they loved the direction we were taking with guest experience. But with every ambition for world domination, there's always challenges, yeah? There was an uphill battle involved in here as well. So there was a time when growth had stalled. Even though the team was building everything we could do for all the customer subsegments we were addressing. Implementation was super smooth at some customers and complete chaos at others. When I talk to my commercial colleagues from customer success management and from sales, when they would go to these industry conferences, they would quite often come back a bit dejected, go all excited, but come back a bit dejected with the feeling that we weren't able to compete on all fronts. We didn't have that one superpower that David needed to have against the industry Goliaths. So we were a niche product in a crowded market. And we also tried some poorly ill-timed pivots. We ventured into events a bit early when the product was not really ready. So we had one of these customers hosting one event 1 year. To kind of scare you guys a bit, if you're walking out for lunch today and you have to pay out there and you have to pay at a terminal with so many people there, if that terminal behaves at a snail's pace, no one will like that product there, right? So we had that experience as well. So all in all, not everything was rosy, and we needed to act. It's public news that the organization had to go through some restructuring as well, which meant we had less number of people to work with going forward, but we still had the grand ambitions that we had. So there was an urgency to act now. What you see on the screen now, and hopefully yes, what you see on the screen now, in essence, is the different types of customers that we had sold Favorite to. These people used our solutions, and what was one thing that was in common amongst all of them? That they were all a part of the hospitality sector. They all served guests in one way or the other. So everyone bought us. Restaurants, hotels, cruises, canteens in retail outlets, and food courts all the way from Oslo to Trondheim. Everyone bought us, but not everyone adopted us. There was a difference. We were spread across too many segments, spread too thin with the efforts, and we were not able to really accelerate from that point. If a few of you are in the public sector space, you can also kind of draw analogies here. Imagine building a single product that caters to parents, teenagers, pensioners, and small business owners. How would that fly? So there was a bit of a challenge there, and we quickly realized that when you are trying to be everything for everyone, you really end up being nothing for anyone. Right, so that was the context. Let's switch gears into an inspiration. What we did next was inspired from some of the material in this book. Jeffrey Moore writing Crossing the Chasm, super interesting, inspiring, and practical book at the same time. Talks about identifying your first target, doubling down to dominate, and then expanding thereafter. Isn't the theme today back to basics? That's what it is, back to basics. What was the connection with us? We had believers in our products. We had some customers that really believed in it, but we were not yet ready for the mainstream market. There was still work to be done. So we had to differentiate between who really loved us today with the products we had now compared to those who we wanted to sell tomorrow to grow our business. And then we also had an aha moment with this kind of a book. What you often hear about focus is you should know what you want to do, and you should know what you do not want to do. Make those things clear, and you have focus. This exercise also told us something about sequencing. So focus is not just about exclusion, but also about sequencing, which meant for us as a business, we had a path where we would start from addressing a smaller set of opportunity areas for the small set of subsegment that really loved us, till a path to a destination where we would look at wider set of opportunities, features, whatever you call it, for a broader set of segments that we had ambitions for. Right, that's all theory, all textbook. What does it have to do with practice? Great, let's get to that part. So what we did was, in the leadership team, we had a conversation about this, that there was an urgency to act, the business was not able to accelerate, how do we proceed? Here, my founder and I were quite aligned with the fact about the urgency, and we kind of agreed on the next steps we want to take. We decided to look at a product segmentation model where 3 steps to product-centric segmentation, essentially. First step would be defining your success metrics. Second step would be collecting the data on your customer portfolio and analyzing it. And then third would be execute on the findings based upon the insights you have. Common sense, isn't it? Nothing groundbreaking, and that's why it's back to basics. But there was a twist to this, and I'll come to that. Let's dive into the first one, defining the success metrics. I'm not in sync here, it seems. All right, defining success metrics. With any such exercise, you always want to begin with the goal of the business. Where do you start from? Is it recurring revenues? Is it adoption of your product amongst your users? It could be anything else. It all depends upon the product that you have and the business you have. So if you imagine a public sector domain or a non-profit organization, you would look at user adoption amongst multiple users for the products you're building. We were a VC-funded business, a startup. In the tech space, for us, annual recurring revenues was the key goal that we were chasing. Right, that's the starting point. What next? Then there was a point of trying to identify amongst all of those different customers that I showed you, the logos I showed you, which one were the good customers that we should be running after so that the business can grow with acceleration and focus. We cannot cater to all of them, that we've established. So in order to reach at that point, we need to identify what does a good customer look like for us, and then define all the metrics that would drive that. Now, the thing with metrics is you pick one metric and everyone knows how to game it. It's super easy. So you always need to have metrics that are from different domains, and sometimes what I even call opposing metrics. So imagine speed and quality are opposing metrics. You want to go very fast, you can compromise on quality. You want to go super high quality, you can go really slow. So finding that right balance is essential, which means these are opposing metrics. So when it came to our exercise, we wanted to get down to that and see what are the different opposing metrics we should look at. So when we started looking at this, we said when it comes to good customers, we want to find metrics that help us bring new prospects, new users easily into the door, that help us convert these new users as paying customers, and that we can serve rather easily without breaking our backs, because we were a small organization. So we went into the exercise where we started defining the metrics, and I do not expect you to read all of them, but they're fairly clear, I guess, not to you guys. So I'm going to zoom in. At Favorite, we then decided to look at the kind of customers that we were targeting. So we looked at our customer portfolio and said, these are cafes, bars, restaurants, events, hotels, the list you saw before. So we said, this is the one of the things. Second thing we wanted to look at was, how did we win these customers? Did we call them up and ask them if they would be interested in our product? That's outbound. Or did they come in because they had a referral, or they saw our website, they fill in a booking form? That would be inbound. So trying to identify within the customer base, what was that behavior we saw? And then looking at how easy was it to implement or to onboard these customers. Did it take, like I said, super simple to complete chaos? Did it take several calls to coordinate this thing? Did it take many days? So we need to quantify this in one way or the other. One of the other things was the cost to serve, because we were a small organization, which meant the number of support tickets we get from this customer when they start using us also has a strain on the org. So let's look at, let's say, number of support tickets, for example. That could be a metric. So on and so forth. You get the idea. These were some of the metrics. There were others. But we defined these are the set of metrics that if we are able to find a cohort of customers, a pattern in there that is in the right direction, then we have a pattern that we can replicate and then go after new customers with. So step one was defining the metrics. Let's look at the step two, where we started gathering this data and analyzing and finding patterns in there. So starting to pull out what data is available for each of those metrics I talked about. Pull what's available, really. That represents that metric and is a proxy to it. Look for then patterns amongst all of that. And then, of course, classify them into cohorts that you can act on. If you cannot act on them, then they do not make sense, which means you've got to iterate. So back to spreadsheets. A simple spreadsheet that we pulled all the data from, and then we pulled the data from, I want to go back to the ugly view. We pulled all the data from HubSpot, Services Hub, Marketing Hub, Sales Hub. We went to Power BI, pulled all the data from there. We looked at spreadsheets from the finance team, looked at other data inside the organizations, talked to the product marketing manager colleague I had who worked with the CSMs, the customer success managers, and with the sales guys. So all of that we did, pull it up in an Excel sheet, and at this time I felt I had a PhD in VLOOKUPs. So now we're trying to find patterns within the industry. What do we see when it comes to the bars? Or do we see less complexity there? Are these kind of restaurants with better complexity? Are we able to serve them? But this was like our taxonomy of the industry was a trap. There was no way to figure out any patterns in there. It was neat categories that nothing actually fit into this properly. It was perfect on paper, but not usable in practice. So all the cafes, bars, fast casual, full service, hotels, events, festivals, we couldn't find any patterns. So this was, well, not a lost battle yet, because that meant we had to pivot. So from this, we decided that we need to break free from this industry taxonomy. And when I say taxonomy, I mean the way you kind of cluster these customers, right? So we decided that this was time to move from this kind of a categorization or taxonomy into more behavior-driven. How do these customers behave? What do their configurations look like? How are they organized? So when you think about, I don't know if you ever thought about this when walking into venues. That was the first time working in Favorite I ever thought so much about a restaurant. My wife hated the fact that I would always dissect the receipts I would get from my customers because I was looking for pointers on how they do this. But that was a different story. So walking into these customers and looking at their venues, we understood that there are different kinds of restaurants or different kinds of hospitality venues. For example, some that really needed queues to move fast. When you walk out from here after this talk, hopefully wait till the end. When you walk out later on, and you're going to get lunch, you want that queue to move fast, right? You don't want to be standing there for a long time, and that can only be done by the system that sits on the other side. So some venues like that. Other venues had complex seating arrangements. You have restaurants with 10 tables. That's it, one kitchen. And there are others with tables on different floors, 100 tables. These two have very different needs. And then you would have the other complexity of kitchens. One kitchen only versus multiple kitchens on multiple floors, some for pizzas, others for the sushi. There was a whole spectrum out there. And you would think, why is this guy talking about restaurant configurations? What does it have to do with this ordering platform? Well, it does, because in order to deliver a smooth customer experience, a smooth guest experience, when you go to dine somewhere, everything in the back needs to organize properly, which means the staff in the kitchens need to be able to talk to the staff that's serving, to the staff that's going to seat the guests. All of that is connected. So we had to move away from this industry taxonomy to a bit more behavior-driven, configuration-driven at the customer venues, which meant there was need for an adoption. So that spreadsheet underwent another change. We brought in a few more metrics there, and these were a bit more qualitative in nature, right? This was an understanding of the customer's behavior patterns there. We got our customer success managers and the sales guys who knew these venues well to start giving us feedback on, well, this customer's venue is actually like this. They've got one kitchen, they have 10 kitchens, and so that helped us kind of codify the different kinds of customers. And then we got down to identifying what the cohorts were going to look like. So we're done with now step 2, where we started gathering this data, figured out that the patterns were not really the industry taxonomy-based stuff, but actually behavior-driven, which means we now need to create the cohorts and act on them. So let's get to step 3, where we execute. Insight without execution is pointless. So the next step was defining our yet another jargon, ICP, Ideal Customer Profile. So we figured that from all the data that we had gathered and analyzed, we saw that it was really the venues that were in the urban locations, not at a remote skiing location, but actually in the urban locations, venues that had more dominant drink-related products, and venues that had a very simple kitchen setup, no fancy complex stuff. These were the ones that really resonated with our product, that we could do the implementation easily, and they had a less burden of support on us. That was the insight for us, which then led us to the understanding, what did they really like about the product? So we figured that they loved the fact that our product was the fastest, helped them get stuff done quickly. It was simple, it didn't need training. They could have any number of new joinees in their organization, as in the restaurants and the venues as waiters, and they didn't need fancy training, and that it was simple to implement this thing when they would set it up and scale in their new venues. So that meant we understood what these customers resonated with, which informed the product strategy that we were building, and also the go-to-market strategy that we were building, which means with these unique selling propositions, both the product strategy, everything that we were building, and the messaging that we had towards the outwards towards the world was all aligned. What that meant was, if we were able to duplicate this messaging, this product strategy, and double down on this, it would mean that we will be able to attract more of these similar customers, prospects. We should be able to close them in a short sales cycle, because that's what our data said. We would be able to have a smoother onboarding without complete chaos there, and we should expect higher adoption and growth in retention. This is the patterns we had seen, and we were trying to replicate this. What does it mean for the product organization, which is building the products? So from a prioritization perspective, at the end of the day, also still going back down to the basics. Double down on your goal by addressing one target segment, a sub-segment. Double down, dominate that first, and only then look at expanding to adjacencies. What does that translate to in the product roadmaps that we are building? So if you look at this table, and I'll spend a moment to explain this, on each of these rows you see is an opportunity area. You can call that an opportunity, call that a feature, whatever flies within the organization works. But in essence, these are things that you know you want to build towards your customers. And then each of the columns you see are now not cafes and bars and events, but actually venues that are very behavior-centric. Are they led by drinks? Are they led by food products? Do they have a single kitchen, complex kitchens, multiple kitchens, all of these different? So this was, in a way, the segmentation that we had moved into. Right, now that's a blank slate. Many opportunities, several products, several segments to look at. Where do we start? We knew we wanted to dominate the drink-led segment first. So prioritizing stuff mainly for the drink-led menus gave us the starting point. We were able to do well, customers liked us there. And then anything else that came that didn't support this segment would essentially be for later. I'm not going to touch it now. Wonderful idea, brilliant, curious, learning more. Not now, right? Say that in nicer ways. We product guys can always say no in nicer ways. And then there's opportunities that supported this sub-segment still, that you would still want to do, but if it's only helping me expand the reach of different kinds of customers, I would then pick this up or sequence it in my roadmap. And then there were other opportunities that were further overlapping with a bit further off segments. Then we would try and test adjacencies, not necessarily by building them, but through product discovery. Now, this helped us include and exclude features on what to test and build, and also help us sequence the opportunities in a priority list based upon where we saw the potential for expansion. What does this all result into? So I talked through many different steps, many practical things we did. What was the outcome of this? So the results we saw there was the target subsegment that we were heading into, the drink-led segments, we had like double the growth in that period when we executed on this. And then in the year before, when we said the growth had stagnated, we were a startup that had only grown 20% year on year, we actually managed to grow close to 60%. And in the subsequent year, also close to 50%. And from a more qualitative perspective, we managed to improve the conversions from new prospects coming in the door to actual customers. We managed to accelerate the onboarding, less chaos, and reduce the support burden on the organization that we were with. So in essence, it helped us move from chaos to clarity, helped the product team prioritize ICP-specific features. Commercial team was focused on doing the outreach to ICP-specific customers, and that got us a tighter feedback loops and clearer priorities, helping us all row in one direction. Now, it also gave us momentum through focus. It gave the product teams permission to say no. We wouldn't build this because it doesn't fit the ICP. It allowed the commercial teams, this was very interesting, to say to new prospects, potential customers, they would say, not now. They would not say no, they would say not now. And I'll touch on that. And the customers that felt this was a product made for us, works for my needs, high retention, good adoption. So win-win on that one. Looking back, this was the recipe, the way we did it. What were some of the key ingredients in this? There are many what-ifs always on these things. So some pitfalls we managed to avoid was we didn't get hung up on the right metric. You can get completely pedantic about it. You can spend hours and days discussing this is the right metric. Let's pick a proxy. Let's iterate on it, see if it works. Otherwise, move on and try something else. Because these things are not written down in stone. You have to iterate on these. Then we looked at the data plumbing. I call it the data plumbing. In essence, ensuring that we didn't try to let's get all the data in Power BI. Let's put the data pipelines in place. Let's put everything in place so that the data is visible only in the one Power BI dashboard. No point wasting time on this. If you're going to iterate on this beautiful spreadsheet just works. Someone needs a PhD in VLOOKUP, but that's a different story. And then, don't do this alone. I could very well, as a product guy, say, this is my job, I'm going to do all of this, get all the data from here and there. You don't then have the buy-in from others in the organization. So share the responsibility, share the burden, don't do it alone. Working with the product marketing manager I worked, fabulous guy. He worked with a lot of the CSMs. I worked with the CSMs. We worked with the data teams, the commercial teams. Also worked with developers and designers in the organization to kind of get to this point. So make sure it's a team game. And then, why did it really work? Some prerequisites, which means you've got to work towards these things if you want to get success, is acknowledging or getting the leadership team on board. Having them acknowledge that we're in trouble, and we spread too thin, something needs to be done. And being able to willing and say not yet to the new revenue, not now to the new revenue. And this is what I alluded to before. So I have been in some prospect conversations, in new potential customers, where the sales guy is doing the discovery, figuring out what kind of setup they have, how are they organized, how many kitchens, 20 kitchens, one kitchen, whatever it is, and then said, you got a complex setup. You know what? Our platform today is not designed to help you with it. So I'm not going to make you false promises today. We will not be able to help you now. But we are a rapidly scaling organization. We build things quickly. We do a lot of discovery and iteration. We know we will get to this point in a few months. I would like to touch base with you in a few months and then see where we are and what your needs are at that point. Which meant having the guts to say, I'm not selling you today. I'm going to come in again later on and see that this revenue is postponed for later. So even having the leadership team willing to take that kind of a stance is a prerequisite, and it's quite a bold stance to take. It's not the easiest thing to do. And last but not the least, adopt the mindset of progress over perfection. That is super crucial to be able to get to that point. So in essence, 3 steps to product-centric segmentation. Define your metrics, gather the data, analyze your customer portfolio, and then take actions from that. So like I said, 3 simple, common sense steps, nothing fancy about it, but back to the basics, and then break free from the labels so that you are able to find the right actionable cohorts. With that, I'm going to wrap up on a poetic note, and much what has been said about AI so far, I'm going to try a poetic note with AI, where you can find where your product shines best, but let exclusion and sequencing do the rest. It was well-rhymed. ChatGPT, thank you. There are some ways you can reach me digitally. You've got my contacts here, or find me in the lobby. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for your attention. Have a good day.